everyone, and happy Friday. I hope everyone is doing well. For us in the United States, it's 4th of July weekend, so we have a really long weekend coming up. But I just wanted to say hello to Celina Gratton. She is my guest today. Hello, Celina. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I know it's a little later where you are located at, so I just want to tell you thank you for being flexible with me today. Can you let everybody know where exactly you are located?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm based in Bristol, which is in the UK. So it's currently 5:30 o'clock, just finishing up work, so no worries at all.
Nice. It's around 11:30 here. So I'm right after this, I'm going to go grab my kids and get some lunch. But it's really cool that we have technology that allows us to connect with one another and have conversations with each other. So to get the conversation started, I really like to have guests, just provide a brief background of who they are. And I know you work with Authentise. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. I was having a hard time this morning getting it together for the video that I was making. But if you could just first off tell us who you are and how you got involved with engineering, because you have experience in materials engineering, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually was born and raised in Singapore, so on the other side of the world, and I'm originally half Canadian, half Finnish. So I studied engineering in Canada, specifically materials engineering, and I was lucky enough to do a few internships while I was at uni, including one in materials of additive manufacturing. So I really got excited in the technology. I also had a father who, my father was a pilot, so I really was into aerospace, and I got a position at Airbus in the 3D printing or additive manufacturing team. And I worked in Airbus for about 5 years, started in Germany and then moved to the UK. And then, recently I had switched teams and I was looking to get back into the additive manufacturing sector, and I wanted to work for a smaller company. So that's when I started working for Authentise about 7 months ago now.
And can you kind of just give us a brief background of who Authentise is and some of the solutions or products you provide customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Authentise is a software company. So we develop a manufacturing execution system for advanced manufacturing. So it started off specifically for additive manufacturing in order to track the process from end to end for our customers and service providers to have a digital thread of everything they're producing within their facility. Today, we're expanding to other manufacturing types and looking more at digital manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and sort of everything in that field, which is very exciting.
That's really cool. I want to pull in Angela Thurman. She's viewing with us today. She said materials engineering, very cool. And to anyone else who's listening, feel free to drop in a line and say hi, or if you have a question for Celina, feel free to ask that as well too. I'll try to get to everyone's comments and questions as we progress through the interview. I really love additive manufacturing. A long time ago, I actually worked with an additive manufacturing platform manufacturer. So what they did was they created the large format printers. And what was interesting about it is they actually weren't subject matter experts in additive manufacturing. They had a really good line of mechatronics, and they wanted to showcase their mechatronics at a trade show. And they thought, okay, what is the best way we can showcase our mechatronic capabilities? So they came up with these large format printers. And when they brought the printer to the trade show, more people were inquiring about the actual printer than they were about the mechatronics. So then they decided to develop large format printers. And it's really cool to see how far that technology has come. Because I just remember during my publication days, getting one of the small additive manufacturing, like the small desktop 3D printers, and printing off I think one of my friends printed off a Darth Maul or a Stormtrooper pen holder, and it was really funny just to play with. But what did you like about that type of process, because it is, you know, something that's people are still considering and kind of exploring. It's still considered new, and there's
Exactly.
more advances coming up. So what do you like about additive manufacturing?
Yeah, so initially I thought it was just really, it sounded really cool. I mean, 3D printing, that sounds awesome. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, it's, like you said, it's actually not new. The technology has been around for over 30 years now. But what is developing faster and faster is the different types of technologies, or the different types of additive manufacturing. So it started off as plastic prototyping, but today we're actually printing flying metal aerospace parts, which has taken a large amount of time to certify, but that's what we're doing today. For example, Authentise, we sell our software to production facilities. So these are companies that have a very high throughput of parts that they print using additive manufacturing. So I don't think a lot of us realize how far this technology has actually come today. And I think something else that really drew me to the technology is just the different use cases that you can apply to the technology, especially coming from an aerospace background. I understand that a lot of parts are very difficult to manufacture, whereas using additive manufacturing, you can pretty much print any design that you can think of, as long as you can design it on the computer. All you have to do pretty much is just press print, and it'll just come out of the printer as you want it. So it's very useful for very complex parts, or parts that you want to kind of certify or finalize before going into mass production, for example. I also, working at Airbus, I was also working in the spare parts department. So that's when additive manufacturing was especially useful, because if a customer needed a part and we didn't have it in the warehouse and it would take 9 months to manufacture it, then 3D printing was a great solution to provide it as quickly as possible. So yeah, it really helps the supply chain as well.
It seems fairly easy to learn too. I remember just doing some of the programming and creating a small tugboat. And for someone who doesn't have really a lot of experience in engineering and manufacturing on the design or technical side of things, like I'm a technical writer, so I just write about that stuff. But
Yeah.
to be able to sit in front and then have someone say, okay, here's what this is, here's what that is, and then being able to design a small tugboat, I was really like proud of myself for doing that.
Yeah.
We have another guest who, Avery, got my first additive machine in 1998. That's really, really cool. And the other thing that I like about it too is just the opportunities, as you mentioned. It's capable of printing these complex parts that you really can't create on some of our traditional processes like CNC machining. And
Exactly.
the thing that I think is cool too, it even provides opportunities for, you know, individual businesses, or, you know, entrepreneurs or small businesses. There's a woman that I know, her name is Danielle Boyer, and she actually uses small 3D printers to create robotic kits to send to indigenous tribes, because she's Ojibwe, and she wants to expand that technology to communities who might not have the resources for it. So she uses 3D printers to create small robotic kits so that she can teach indigenous tribes about robotics. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really like that. And Avery also said powder-based, really fragile parts. It's come a long way. I agree. I think that's a really good point as well too. Thank you, Avery, for your comments. I appreciate that. So as I mentioned before, you're based in the UK, and I was wondering how things are there in terms of recruiting the next generation. Are you seeing some of the same things we're seeing here in the United States and in North America in terms of like the manufacturing labor shortage and the skills gap, and even the gender gap? Like what's what's it like in the UK in terms of, you know, the manufacturing?
Yeah. So I've worked a little bit, well, I did an internship in Canada in the aerospace industry as well. And just from my initial thoughts, I think it is quite similar. There obviously is a gender gap there still. But from sort of my 10 years since I started uni in engineering all the way to here, I can actually see a difference, and I can see more and more people and more resources of women in STEM who are open to talk about it. I found great mentors along the way as well. So even though we are still, we're not there, we're not where we want to be, I feel like I can see or have seen an increase in women being encouraged to stay in STEM and just to take on engineering and manufacturing roles, which I think is great. And there's still lots to do, but there's so many great communities that that are raising more and more awareness, which I think is important.
Was it something that you were always passionate about when you were in school? Like what was like the tipping point for you when you made the decision, I want to pursue something in STEM?
So since I was young, I've always liked building things, and I've always just liked the logic of how things are structured. I had to choose my subjects in like high school, I guess, sort of A levels equivalent. And I straight away I went for higher level physics, and I liked all the sciencey and mathematical subjects more. I don't know why. It's just always, since I was young, I always knew I wanted to go into something techy. And even though I did see that I was a gender minority within that group, personally, it never bothered me. I couldn't think of anything else I could do in my life. So I was like, I'm fine with this because I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm studying. And yeah, same thing going into engineering, even though it was more male dominated. For me personally, it never affected me because, again, I was talking to my friends doing all these different degrees, and I just couldn't picture myself doing anything else but engineering. So yeah.
So in your opinion, how important is mentorship there in the UK? Because I feel like here, if in order for us to really get the next generation excited about what's going on in our sector, we really need to show them that it's a place for them. So I'm always trying to connect kids to people within the sector and letting them see some of the things that they're doing. Because when you're in school and you're not doing the hands-on, I think it's really difficult to really understand what advanced manufacturing is. And I don't believe like there is a particular curriculum yet, or they're still developing it on additive manufacturing. Cause like when you go to school, you're generally learning about like, chemical engineering or electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. And I don't ever remember there ever being like a niche for additive manufacturing. And maybe I'm probably misquoting that. I'm hoping that it's changed because it's such a great technology and it's advancing so quickly. So hopefully they're developing more and more curriculum and bringing that to the high schools. But who were your main mentors growing up that really solidified that, yes, this is the place for me?
Yeah. So I guess, well, going into university, most of my professors in engineering and math were male. And one of my internships that I did at Monash University in Australia in the 3D printing lab, the head of the lab, the professor that was in charge of the entire lab, was a woman. And I think that's the first time, sort of, since I started working, that there was someone I could really look up to and be like, wow, there's a female in a very powerful position in this engineering facility. And I thought that was awesome. And I had something to strive for. And any doubts that I have were not that I had many doubts, but still I knew that I could do it, that there were other women in these powerful positions. And I think the fact that it impacted me so much, I understand today how important it is for us women who are working in the manufacturing industry, in engineering, to really go out there and share experiences with younger girls, with younger women, because I know that it will encourage them to keep going.
You had an experience to be a mentor to someone. So do you want to explain that process a little bit more for us? Because I know some companies, they want to start mentorship programs and do more apprenticeships and bring in more interns, but to get their personnel to actually volunteer their time, or even if it's a paid incentive. Sometimes they're a little hesitant to do that because they're a little intimidated by that whole process. So I was curious to know what your experience was like, how you got involved with it, and
Yeah.
what some of your fears were before going into it, and then what you learned from that whole experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was through an association called Women in 3D Printing. So it's a sort of international association of women who work in additive manufacturing, and they created a mentorship program. So they had forms for mentors and mentees, and then they'd pair them up for a quarter. And so I would have meetings online with my mentee, going through sort of what she's doing at the moment, what are her goals, and how can we create something for her to achieve her goals. I did this about a year or two ago. And going into it, so I was encouraged by a few friends who are in this program.
Okay.
Going into it, I was a little bit unsure because I had never acted as a mentor before, and I wasn't sure if I knew enough to be one. But I suppose sometimes you're just so caught up in your day-to-day activities, and you talk to people who know so much about the subject that you feel like you know nothing. But then when you turn around and speak to someone who's at uni, you're like, oh wait, I actually know a lot of things. So it went better than expected. And I formed a good connection with my mentee there. And yeah, I hope that, well, obviously I'll keep doing it, but I hope that more women, as they go through sort of their career, is something that they consider doing, because I think it really does have an impact to younger
Yeah,
women.
I think that's such a great perspective too, because I think all of us have felt that somewhere in our career, where we meet such inspirational people who have such a loud voice and they're great leaders, and you admire them so much. And then when someone else, comes to you and says, "Hey, thank you, I've learned so much for you," it's kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of repeating what that person said and applying my own perspective to it. So it's really cool how the tables could turn that way. Is there anything like from your mentee that you learned? Like, did you learn anything from them during that process?
Yeah. So obviously it was my first time, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But she, so she grew up in a very different culture as I did. And I was used to
Okay.
going to university, in North America with my North American friends. And, I had just a very, I guess, tunnel vision view of what an engineering degree was. But in other parts of the world, education is very different. And I think I learned a lot about how her education system worked, and what kind of internships she was striving for. Even though we had that same connection with additive manufacturing, her specifics weren't in materials, they were more in design, for example, and
Oh,
coding,
okay.
which is something that I didn't really have experience with. But despite that, I think that we were able to work a lot on her soft skills, but also I was able to give her some guidance on her technical skills. Even though I personally didn't know how to do it, I could still help her find resources and stuff. So it was a challenge, but yeah, it was a good learning experience for me as well.
I think that's another good point too. And I think it's very cool how much world experience that you've had personally, because you've been to different countries, you've gotten to work with different people and different cultures. And I think that's important for some of us to remember that, manufacturing is a global thing. And
Mm.
thought processes are different across genders, across states, across countries, across cultures. So it is really important for all of us to learn from one another to get the best, innovative thought processes and ideas that are
Yeah.
out there. So that's really cool that you've had that experience, and hopefully you're looking forward to doing it again. With the 3D women, 3D tech, what is the group called? 3D Women in
Women
3D
in 3D
Technology.
printing.
Wow, I need more coffee today. I must be excited. Um, is that is that just in the UK, or is that an international
No,
organization?
it's an international organization, from Asia, Europe, Africa, and America. and they host, I highly recommend people to check it out. They host like virtual events. Sometimes they host like in-person socials. And I've met a lot of people through that and have managed to kind of grow my network. They also host a conference once a year, and I was a panelist and a speaker on the conference this year, which again was very nerve-wracking, but put myself out there, and you learn a lot from that, and you meet so many interesting people from that as well. So yeah, it's a really nice organization.
What are some of the things that they cover during those conferences? Is it like the latest trends or issues going on in 3D printing? What are some of the main things they cover?
Yeah, so they have different tracks. I think there's technology, education, something that's more to do with like marketing and HR, so like non-technology 3D printing. And there's a fourth one, I can't remember what it is. But in each of the tracks, which are like virtual stages, they'll invite different women to speak about, well, either as speakers or panelists. So they have specific topics, for example, on aerospace, or like you said, new trends, or jewelry, or just different techniques and struggles. So there's just so much to learn from that.
That's really cool. I have a presentation coming up in August, and
Yeah.
I'm like really nervous about that because like
Yeah.
it's just you standing in front of an audience. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you shared that same fear, because
Yeah,
that means I can get
absolutely.
over it and be successful at it.
Yeah.
In terms of additive manufacturing, what are some of the newest trends or things coming up that you're observing that you're most excited about?
Well, having such a strong aerospace background, that is more the path that I look to. So when I was working in additive manufacturing at Airbus, there were still a lot of ongoing issues about certifying parts, qualifying machines and materials, etc. And I'm just excited for there to be a day where everything's qualified, everything's certified, and we can go and print parts in like an actual production site for multiple kinds of different parts, and especially spare parts. So aerospace is one of them, but also I think the software side is very exciting. Additive manufacturing is an advanced technology, and it's a digital technology, and there can be some like cyber risks with that. For example, if you have a file that you want to send to a printer, everything's done via Wi-Fi. But with sort of advanced software, this is something that we can protect. And also it's something that we can allow to do what I call local manufacturing. So for example, instead of having a big manufacturing site, you could have a few printers around the world. Giving an aerospace example, but for example, if there's an aircraft that needs a little piece in Fiji, and the aircraft is stuck for 5 days because they're waiting for this spare part to be shipped from another country, that costs like tens of thousands of dollars to the airline every day. But if Fiji had a little printer, for example, through the advanced software, the like plane OEM, let's say Airbus in Europe, could use that software to send the part directly to the printer securely, print the part on site, and then they could just go and install the printer. So
is that
yeah.
something that your company does then for manufacturers?
So the concept I spoke about, at least in aerospace, doesn't exist today that I know of, but our software is definitely advanced enough to do that. So we're ready. We're just waiting for the
That's really
manufacturers
cool.
to be ready. Yeah.
That's really cool and exciting. Well, I'm going to have to keep an eye on that and keep in touch with you to see how that progresses. Because, yeah, I know cybersecurity is a big buzzword now with a bunch of things going on, especially with smart factories and robotics that you control on mobile devices. And I know they just came out with a new standard, and super long and complicated. I do not envy anybody in that area because there's just so much to it. I talked to a specialist in that area, and I did not envy her at all because it just seems so much information And if you're a small to medium-sized manufacturing, it can be a little intimidating, try to take that feat on your own. Well, Celina, before I let you go, I always like to ask, my guests, if they had one ask for our audience, what would your ask be?
Personally, I'm going to come back to the whole aspect of mentoring, because I think it's something that really helped me in my education, and I think it's something that is probably one of the most impactful thing for young women in education. So I would ask the audience to reach out to younger women, maybe volunteer their time to mentor women who are starting out in engineering or who are still at university. If it's possible, I think that it will impact them more than you think.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're not a potential for being a mentor, try to rethink that, because I think the ones who are hesitant to be it are actually the greatest ones to become mentors. Real quick, Angela did ask a question. She said aerospace regulations don't yet allow spare parts to be printed and installed because those parts wouldn't be qualified or certified, right? And I would not be the one to answer this, so I wouldn't know. And then Rebecca said, great ask, exactly what is needed. Oh, she's talking about the mentors.
So in aerospace, there are some parts that are qualified and certified to fly already. But in order, or at least when I was working there, it could have improved today. But when I was working there, every time you wanted to print a new design to install on an aircraft, you had to certify the machine you were printing on. You had to certify the powder. You had to certify all the post processes, any painting or coating. And then you had to certify the design itself. So you had to test the design after you've done all those steps. So that takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. And at the end of that process, all you can do is print this one single part on that exact same printer with that exact same material. So I think what we're gearing towards is being able to print multiple designs and multiple parts without having to do that entire process every single time. So that's why it is very, very slow at the moment. But having said that, there are some 3D printed components that are flying in our aircraft today, just not a lot of them yet.
So it's not something for high volume production of parts, because you're going to need to recertify if even like the slightest change is made. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at the moment, today in the present is how it works. Again, this was 5 years ago when a couple years ago. But I guess the vision is, if there is the minor change to the piece, you wouldn't have to recertify or redo the entire process, that you could just approve the change of design and then keep doing the process that you used to do. So that's sort of where we're trying to get to.
That's really interesting. Well, Angela, that's a great question. We'll have to stay up to date on that as well too. I know I went to an event earlier in the year, and I was talking to a woman who was head of the additive manufacturing unit that they had for an aerospace company, and she was talking about some of those challenges, and she did bring that up, and I was just like, wow, that seems like a really difficult thing to do, or tedious process to do. And she's like, it can be. And then the event focused on data information. So you have your people data, your product data, your materials data. And she said that one of the challenges they were facing is sometimes the legacy data doesn't match what they're doing with their current data. And she's like, it's a huge process to go through all of that and try to find information and update our thing, because she's like, you can't get rid of the legacy data. Sometimes you have to hold on to that because it's against regulations to get rid of it. Angela also said the Airbus change approval process is incredibly rigorous. And then Rebecca, fingers crossed these changes can be made. Sounds incredibly reasonable. Hopefully. Well, Celina, is there anything else that you would like to add? If not, if anybody wants to learn more about Authentise and, the products and services that you're providing, where would you lead them and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on LinkedIn would probably be the best channel to find me. I don't think there's too many Celina Grattons out there. Or then my email would just be celina@authentise.com. And just sort of as a last word, I want to reiterate how important it is to mentor, to speak to the younger generation, and even just networking in general. So I'd be more than happy to chat to anyone in the audience today and to learn more about what you do. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone who's attending.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today on Mavens of Manufacturing. If you're here in the United States, I hope you have a great, wonderful 4th of July weekend, and we will see you again next week. Have a great one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Ink Solutions. Z Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zinkSolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.